Hi. I'm going to switch it up today with a bit of a change content-wise. Although I normally talk about Space Marines, Space Marine chapters, Primarchs, and general Imperium stuff, I felt that I should actually do a fun little deep dive on the lore of what is probably the most important planet in the galaxy aside from Terra itself. Well, and Mars. And maybe some others. And that, my friends, is Cadia. I mean, also, it's in my name. I kind of felt obligated to talk about Cadia eventually, so here we are. I also want to quickly give thanks for the great reception on my two most recent videos about the fates of the Primarchs. Both of them are performing far above what any of my videos have so far, and it's all thanks to you guys watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. I appreciate all of you. Now, this video will essentially be in two parts, because the history of Cadia is in two parts. First, we'll look at 30k Cadia, which is full of terrifying dark chaos magic, and then we'll look at more recent Cadia, which is full of badass Astra Militarum soldiers, and we will not be looking at present-day Cadia, because it, doesn't exist. But we'll get to that. I will still be spending some time in this video talking about Space Marines and Primarchs, because our journey through the history of Cadia begins with the most influential Primarch of them all, Lorgar. So, do you guys remember that time when the Emperor chastised Lorgar for labeling him as a god by wiping out nearly all life on a planet, then appearing on the planet's surface, emitting an aura that was so overpowering that no one could dare even look at him, and psychically forcing Lorgar and his 100,000 warriors to kneel before him with the power of his mind? Totally not stuff that a god would do, obviously. Well, that event, which was meant to steer Lorgar and his legion back towards the path of spreading the Imperial truth, ended up having a very different effect. The destruction of Monarchia, which the word-bearers considered the grand jewel in their conquering the galaxy crown, led to a very literal crisis of faith for their Primarch. Having been raised in the polytheistic old faith of his home planet of Colchis, which worshipped the benevolent gods known to the people as Can, Tizen, Slanat, and Narag, try to guess who those actually are, Lorgar had essentially put them to the side after deciding that his father, the Emperor, was in fact the ultimate godly power in the universe. After being severely reprimanded by the Emperor for his faith, Lorgar ultimately made the decision to turn back to the faith of his childhood. The old faith of Colchis, like many similar faiths on human-settled worlds throughout the galaxy, spoke of a pilgrimage, a journey that could be undertaken to find the mythical place where mortals could interact directly with the gods. And ultimately, Lorgar decided that he, alongside the serrated sun chapter of the Word-Bearers Legion, would set off on the pilgrimage, which eventually led them to a planet that was situated next to the biggest warp storm in the galaxy. That warp storm would later become known as the Eye of Terror, and that planet would soon become known to the Word-Bearers as Cadia. Lorgar led the landing party to the planet's surface, where they were greeted by numerous barbaric human tribes. Of all the tribespeople gathered before the Word-Bearers, one stepped forward. She introduced herself as Ingethel, and although they'd never met before, she addressed Lorgar by his name and welcomed him to Cadia. It was during the Word-Bearers' time on Cadia that Lorgar had everything that he suspected revealed to him as the truth. And by the truth, I mean the primordial truth, which was that the gods of chaos were real, that the fact that so many human-settled planets throughout the galaxy held face with such similar roots was not by coincidence, but was actually due to the fact that there literally were real gods that existed in the warp. And in retrospect, it is funny to me that it took this long for that truth to be revealed. Like, humanity had been tearing holes in reality and flying their spaceships into the warp for quite some time by that stage, and they were literally treating the Chaos God's domain as an Imperial space highway, and the Emperor was just like, yeah, don't worry about anything in there. We're cool, guys. Science is the truth. Yeah, science. And meanwhile, there were literal demons constantly trying to claw their way through the Geller fields of these spaceships to devour the souls of the inhabitants on board. But I digress. Ingethel would take Lorgar and many of the Word-Bearers deep into the extensive subterranean structures below Cadia's surface, where she and the other Cadian tribespeople would initiate an absolutely terrifying occult ritual that would see Ingethel turn into a massive, disgusting demon monster thing called Ingethel the Ascended. Now, for real, as I was reading The First Heretic, the book where all of this takes place, I was like, hey, yo, this is really gross. Like, there's a lot of gross shit that happened in that sequence of events. After Ingethel had ascended into her weird, nasty demon form, the adventure had only just begun. For Lorgar, witnessing the birth of a demon prince was proof that the old faith not only had validity, but that it was actually based on a truth that existed just out of sight of mortal comprehension. For many of the word bearers, especially serrated Sun Captain Argel Tal, seeing Ingethel the Ascended had them thinking, "Ew, oh my fucking god, what the fuck is that? What is happening here? This is disgusting. Did that lady just turn into a fucking demon slug monster? Ugh." And Lorgar, seeking to understand the reality of the primordial truth even deeper, would allow Ingethel the Ascended to lead him and his warriors down a path of spiritual enlightenment, if you can call it that, as the Demon Prince unveiled the reality of the primordial truth to them. She also lied about some stuff, namely about the birth of Slaanesh, telling Lorgar that the downfall of the Eldari was due to them rejecting Slaanesh's godhood, and not due to, trillions of Eldari having their souls devoured in the immediate aftermath of Slaanesh's birth. Kind of an important detail there. Following their enlightenment, which included excursions into the Eye of Terror itself, where certain members of the Word-Bearers became possessed by demons, very much against their will, by the way, Lorgar ordered the cyclonic torpedo bombardment of Cadia, completely wiping out the remainder of the planet's population and leaving it barren, and ensuring that no one else within the Imperium would come to know what had transpired there. It wasn't until the 32nd millennium that humanity would return to Cadia, as loyalist Imperial settlers were sent to the now empty planet in the wake of Abaddon the Despoiler's first Black Crusade. It was realized at this point by the Imperium that Cadia's location relevant to the Eye of Terror, which had once been the factor that led to its inhabitants falling to chaos worship, was now crucial in keeping the taint of chaos from spreading further into the galaxy. Cadia stood in the middle of the only reliable avenue out of the Eye of Terror and into real space, this pathway being known as the Cadian Gate. This made it the perfect staging ground for Imperial defense troops to launch interceptions against any Chaos forces that attempted to leave the Eye of Terror in large numbers. It has also been revealed that there existed thousands of large blackstone monoliths across the surface of the planet. Known to the Imperium as the Cadian pylons, these monuments were actually constructed millions of years earlier by the Necrons when they inhabited the planet and served to hold back the influence of the warp. The Cadian pylons were absolutely crucial in halting the spread of the Eye of Terror, keeping the massive wound in reality relatively in check, and preventing it from spreading across the entire length of the galaxy. Because that would be a disaster. I mean, can you just imagine? Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. So yeah, after Cadia was resettled by the Imperium, it essentially existed to have beef with the forces of chaos. Every single Black Crusade launched by Abaddon has originated in the Eye of Terror, and it was often the forces of Cadia that put up the fiercest resistance. In fact, the citizens of Cadia became renowned throughout the Imperium for their martial prowess. Cadian children were raised from birth to be soldiers capable of devastating offense and stalwart defense, training every day of their lives. Cadian shock troops were widely renowned throughout the Imperium and were in high demand on battlefields throughout the galaxy. The reason for their intense and single-purpose lifestyle was due directly to the constant threat of being destroyed by Abaddon and his chaos incursions. And so, we find ourselves in 999 M41, when Abaddon launched his 13th Black Crusade. Each Black Crusade, although always appearing to end in Abaddon's defeat and humiliation, always had secret ulterior purposes, as Abaddon sought to recover ancient artifacts or retrieve otherwise important material for his future use. All 12 of his first Black Crusades were actually just stepping stones leading towards the 13th, as Abaddon was able to unite the largest army the forces of chaos had ever seen. His goal in launching the 13th Black Crusade? Well, as with all of his previous incursions, there were multiple goals, but number one on his nasty, slimy checklist was the final, ultimate destruction of Cadia. Now, the events that transpired during Abaddon's final assault on Cadia are absolutely insane, as they involve the Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Kull and the goat of the Necrons, Trazyn the Infinite, working together to harness the power of the Cadian pylons, and use them not only to defend the planet, but to actually go on the offensive, using the pylons' anti-psychic power to partially shrink the Eye of Terror, if only for a moment. I would love to go more in depth into this entire sequence of events, but I will save it for another video because I want to be able to truly do it justice. Abaddon, faced with the Imperium and the Cadians, and also the GOAT of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and also Trazyn the Infinite putting up an all-time performance, found that he had only one card to play. He had control of a Blackstone fortress, a massive spacefaring weapon that was made of the same material as the Cadian pylons. However, whereas the pylons existed to nullify psychic energy, Blackstone fortresses could be used to gather warp-borne energy, harnessing it and then unleashing it in inconceivably devastating fashion. A fortress in the hands of the greatest war master that Chaos had ever seen, bathed in the warp storms of the Eye of Terror, appeared ready to unleash devastation on Cadia, the likes of which hadn't been seen in the galaxy in millennia. And what did Abaddon do? Well, he basically just threw the fortress at the planet. Like, he literally yeeted it into Cadia. And to be fair, the fortress had been very badly damaged during a battle against the Imperial Fists, and thus wasn't actually capable of operating properly. And to be even more fair, Abaddon just chucking it at Cadia was still pretty effective. The Blackstone fortress struck the planet, gouging a crater hundreds of kilometers wide into its surface. Vast mountain ranges began to crumble, Cadia's surface-spanning oceans began to boil instantly at the site of impact, and the devastation quickly spread across and through the planet. Countless millions upon millions began to perish, but, that's whatever in 40k. What was way more important than that, in the eyes of the Imperium, was that the continent-shattering impact had begun to affect the pylons that were dug deep into the surface of Cadia. The pylons themselves began to become uprooted as massive earthquakes wrecked the planet, and their anti-psychic effect on the Eye of Terror slowly began to reverse. As the effect of the pylons flickered out and died and released their hold on the massive warp storm that dominated Cadia's skies, it is said that amongst the hurricane-force winds that now engulfed the crumbling planet, the maniacal laughter of dark gods could be heard, as they finally set forth to claim their continuously denied prize. The Eye of Terror, no longer held in place by the Cadian pylons, began to expand, releasing from its maw countless demonic hordes. The destruction of Cadia has put the Imperium in an extremely precarious situation. Not only is the Crimson Path, Abaddon's preferred route to Terra, and the Imperial Palace more wide open than ever before, but the Eye of Terror, once only a few light years across, has now grown into a galaxy-spanning warp wound, which has effectively split the Imperium in two. Although the return of Guilliman and the Lion have given some hope to the defenders of humanity, the situation has never been more dire than it is now. Finally, in the face of Cadia's destruction, the shattered and broken up remnants of the planet have since become home to many Chaos warbands, as they use them as staging grounds while they prepare to continue on the Crimson Path, their ultimate goal being to aid Abaddon in his unrelenting quest to tear the body of the Emperor off the Golden Throne once and for all. So, from a planet full of creepy Chaos-worshipping weirdos, to a planet full of badass Emperor-worshipping and Chaos-hating heroes, to a now shattered collection of space debris full of creepy Chaos-worshipping weirdos, Cadia not only has produced some of the best human warriors in Imperial history, but has also been the site of some of the most important, if not the most important, historical events in Imperial history, starting with Lorgar going full Chaos mode, and now with Abaddon going whatever 1,000 times full Chaos mode is. And I would say, R.I.P. Cadia, you were a pretty cool place. But the real ones know that Cadia is more than just a place. And so long as there is at least one soldier still alive in the galaxy with Cadian blood pumping through their veins, Cadia stands. Now, this video was a lot more serious and lore-y than a lot of my videos, with way less borderline incoherent rambling and horrible takes than I normally include, so I wanted to save some time at the end of the video here to make up for that. Now, something I couldn't help but think about is how badass a bunch of Cadian space marines would have been. Like, just imagine what could happen if you took a complete savage from a place like Cadia, who could fight with the same ability as 10 guardsmen from another Imperial planet, and turned them into a space marine. Well, as it turns out, the process to create Space Marines will just turn basically anyone that can pass the trials into a badass anyways, even if they're not really all that great beforehand. Which I guess makes sense. I mean, let's be honest, we're 40k fans, we don't really care about things making sense anyways. I talked in this video about a 12,000-year-old dude that looks like this, teaming up with a 60-million-year-old alien that looks like this to harness the power of a bunch of pyramids to fight a literal wound in the fabric of reality. None of that makes sense. I mean, it does to us, but if someone just watched this video without knowing anything about 40k, they would probably be worried about my psychiatric well-being. So even if the reasoning behind recruiting from Cadia is sensible, it doesn't really matter anyways. but I just can't help but think that if you could take a malnourished runt of a kid from the wastelands of Bal Secundus and turn him into this, that taking a badass Cadian kid and having him undergo the same process would turn him into a beast. Just imagine a whole chapter of Tiberos the Red Wake. Or maybe that would actually be a terrible idea. I don't know. Just be thankful I'm not in charge of anything at Games Workshop because, oh boy, do I have some ideas. And oh boy, are they mostly pretty bad. And to be fair, the Imperium does require billions and billions and billions of people for the Imperial Guard, and no matter what, the vast majority of people die during the Astartes creation process anyways, so why not have 1,000 guardsmen instead of 1 Space Marine? That's fair, I guess. But still, a whole chapter of purple-eyed Cadian Space Marines would go so hard. I can dream, okay? Well, now it's time for what I assume you've all been waiting for. Shameless self-promotion, baby. If you got to this point in the video, I assume you enjoyed it, so if you did, toss me a like, and you can even subscribe to my channel to see more content like this. And let me know what you thought in the comments below. And of course, let me know what you want to see next. I've also got channel memberships available with absolutely nothing to offer in exchange for signing up for them, which I know is very enticing. Well, there's one thing. If you do decide to join, you'll get a shout out at the end of every video, and I will be working to come up with more rewards as the channel continues to grow. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. See ya.